The little girl's voice was almost lost in the wind when she whispered, "Sir, my mom didn't come home last night." But that came later. First, there was only the storm. The wind scraped down the narrow streets of the small town like it was trying to peel the warmth off the world. It was one of those winter mornings that doesn't really feel like morning at all. Dark, quiet, merciless. Snowflakes flew sideways in the air, sharp as tiny needles against bare skin, piling up on roofs and sidewalks that no one had yet disturbed. Lily Hart, 6 years old, walked alone through that white emptiness. Her coat, once a cheerful purple, had faded and lost most of its fluff. It was too thin for a winter like this. A red dress peeked out from beneath it, not nearly enough against the bitter cold. Her boots were soaked through. Every step made a soft squelch and left a tiny imprint that the wind tried to erase. Her brown hair was tied into a crooked ponytail that had come loose on one side, strands freezing to her cheeks. Her lips had gone pale. Her tiny hands were numb inside her damp mittens. She had been walking for hours, ever since the first gray hint of dawn had smeared across the sky like a promise that never arrived. She didn't know the time. She only knew that the night shift whistle should have blown, the buses should have come, and her mother should have crept into their small apartment, kissed her forehead, and whispered, "I'm home, baby." But Rachel Hart had not come home. Rachel always came back from the factory on the edge of town before the sun got too high. No matter how tired, no matter how sore, she always slipped off her boots quietly, kissed Lily's sleeping face, and tucked the blanket under her chin. Always. Until last night. Lily had gone first to the factory gates, staring at the silent building, then to the bus stop near the woods, where the snow drifted in over the benches. There was nobody. No one to ask, no one to tell her it was all a mistake and that her mother was safe. Only the wind and the ache in her chest and the way the snow made everything look like it was disappearing. Mommy always comes home, she told herself, teeth chattering. She always does. She remembered something then. Something her mother had said on one of those late nights when they'd shared a blanket and a cracked mug of cocoa. "If you're ever really scared," Rachel had murmured, brushing Lily's hair from her eyes, "find a kind adult. Or go to the big house on the hill. The man there is nice. He helped people when the factory almost closed. I don't know him, Masan, but I've heard stories." Lily had never been to that house, but she'd seen it from far away. Warm lights on the hill, steady even when the rest of the town went dark. Now, with nowhere else to go and fear pressing against her ribs like a fist, she turned toward the hill. The climb was steeper than it looked from below. Her legs burned. Her breath came out in short, painful bursts, clouds of white in front of her face. She hugged her little backpack to her chest as if it could keep her safe. Through the thick curtain of snow, a shadow grew clearer, a stone wall, iron gates, tall pines creaking in the wind. The mansion appeared like something from a storybook someone forgot to finish. She reached the gate and stopped. A black camera watched from above, its tiny red light blinking. Lily wasn't sure what to do. Was she allowed to be here? Was this man really kind, or had her mother just wanted to comfort her on a lonely night? A sudden gust knocked her sideways. She stumbled, caught herself clumsily. Her legs shook. Her head felt floaty, like it was filled with snow instead of thoughts. She tried to stand tall the way her mother did after long shifts, but her body was too small and too tired. She sank down in front of the gate, curling into herself, arms wrapped around her knees, backpack pressed to her chest. A loud flutter overhead startled her. A crow bursting from a branch, black wings cutting through the white sky. She flinched, tried to stand, but this time her legs simply gave up. She toppled forward into the snow. Somewhere close, there was a soft mechanical click. The gate opened. A man stepped out, framed by swirling snow. Daniel Ashford, 38, wore a long dark coat and a charcoal scarf, his polished shoes already dusted white. There was something sharp in his face. Angled jaw, keen gray eyes, that made most people stand a little straighter when he entered a room. In one gloved hand, he held a leather briefcase, headed for an early meeting in the city, his mind full of numbers and deadlines, until he saw her. A tiny figure crumpled at his gate, small enough to be mistaken for a pile of fallen branches and forgotten trash. But she moved, barely. Daniel dropped the briefcase, It hit the ground with a dull thud he didn't even hear. "Hey!" His voice cut through the wind as he rushed forward. "Sweetheart!" Lily's body folded forward, snow dusting her hair. He reached her just in time, catching her before her face hit the frozen ground. Kneeling in the cold slush, he wrapped his coat around her trembling body, pulling her close to shield her from the wind. Hey, can you hear me?" he asked, his voice suddenly softer. Her lashes fluttered. Her small, ice-cold fingers clutched at his jacket like it was the last solid thing in the world. "Sir?" Her voice was a faint thread of sound. "My mom didn't come home last night. I'm looking for her." Then her hand went limp. Her eyes slid shut. Something in Daniel's chest kicked hard, like his heart had stumbled and had to catch itself. He scooped her up, surprised by how weightless she felt in his arms, like he was holding nothing but air and worry. "Call the doctor!" he shouted toward the house as he strode through the open gate. "Get the fireplace going, now!" Inside, warmth rolled out from the grand stone hearth. He laid her gently on a soft gray sofa near the fire. Her coat fell open, and her little backpack slid off her shoulder, landing on the rug with a dull thump. Daniel hesitated only a second before unzipping it, searching for some clue. Inside were torn knit gloves, a lunchbox with crumbs, and a folded sheet of paper. He opened it carefully. Crayon lines on cheap paper. A blonde woman holding hands with a little girl under a bright yellow sun. 3 hearts floating above them. He stared at the drawing. "Where is your mother?" he murmured, more to himself than anyone else. "And why were you alone in that storm?" He didn't know it yet, not really. But the morning a little girl collapsed in the snow at his gate was the morning his entire life quietly changed direction, like a river finding a new path in the dark. Warmth. That was the first thing Lily felt when she surfaced again. Not the sharp burn of the wind, not the sting of ice in her fingers, but a slow, spreading warmth that felt almost unreal, like waking up inside a dream she was afraid to disturb. A golden glow flickered against the inside of her eyelids. She could smell something. Cinnamon, maybe? And wood smoke. And something clean, like lemon polish on old furniture. She blinked slowly. A tall stone fireplace filled one side of the room, flames dancing in the grate. Books lined the walls and dark wooden shelves. The ceiling seemed impossibly high, the kind of ceiling that belonged in movies, not in the real world where heaters rattled and paint peeled. A thick blanket had been tucked up under her chin, the fabric soft against her cheek. A man sat beside her. He wasn't smiling exactly, but the sharpness she'd seen for a moment out in the storm had faded. In the firelight, his eyes looked tired, focused, and strangely gentle. He held a steaming mug in both hands, as if he'd been waiting for her to wake. "You're awake," he said quietly. His voice had that smooth, late-night radio softness that makes people who can't sleep keep listening. "Good. You scared us for a moment." Lily's fingers curled tighter into the blanket. Her throat felt dry, like she'd swallowed a handful of snow. She said nothing. "It's just warm water," the man added, offering her the mug. "No rush. No one's going to make you talk before you're ready." She pushed herself up slowly, the room tilting once before it settled. She took the mug with both hands. The heat seeped into her skin, sending a strange ache up her arms as feeling returned. "I'm Daniel," he said after a moment. "Daniel Ashford. You're safe here." The name meant nothing to her. Safe meant everything. He didn't crowd her, didn't ask the dozen questions she could see flickering behind his eyes. Instead, he let the silence sit between them for a few breaths, the crackle of the fire filling the space. "Can you tell me your name?" he asked finally. "Lily?" she whispered. Her voice sounded very small in the large room. "Lily Hart." He nodded, like he was filing it away somewhere important. "Lily, okay, do you remember what you said to me outside? About your mom?" She stared down into the mug. The warmth made her eyes sting. "She didn't come home last night," Lily said, the words tumbling out quicker now that they'd been released once already. "She always comes home. She works where the machines are loud. She goes when it's dark and comes back before the sun, but she didn't." "What's her name?" His tone was calm, careful, like he was stepping around something fragile. "Rachel Hart." Something shifted in his expression. Not recognition, not yet, but a spark of familiarity. "Do you know where she works?" he asked gently. Lily's brow furrowed. "It's big, lots of lights at night. People wear vests and hats. It smells funny. She says it belongs to a man in a big house somewhere far." Her gaze flicked to the fireplace, then back to him. I thought maybe you were the only person I could ask. Daniel looked away for a second, jaw tightening. Ashford Industries had half a dozen facilities that ran night shifts within 100 miles. Factories, warehouses, distribution centers. Places he usually saw as lines in a report or dots on a map. Does the building have tall metal fences around it? He pressed, his voice still gentle but more focused now. And big trucks outside? Lily nodded. Fear and hope tangled in her chest. Sometimes she comes home smelling like oil, she added, almost apologetically. She says it's just work smell. Okay, Daniel murmured, more to himself than to her. He stood moving across the room with controlled urgency and picked up his phone from the table. His fingers flew over the screen. For the first time in a very long time, he felt ashamed not to know every face behind the numbers that had made him rich. He turned slightly, so he could see Lily while the call connected. Hi, it's Daniel. I need you to check something for me, he said when his head of HR answered. Employee records for the Miller Ridge plant. Name, Rachel Hart, night shift. There was a pause. Lily watched his face like it was a weather forecast that might decide her future. Yes, sir, came the tinny voice from the phone. Rachel Hart, line worker, scheduled last night on graveyard shift. Did she clock out? Daniel asked, his tone sharpening. Another pause. Longer this time. No, sir. There's no record of her clocking out. No incident report either. She may have left without logging or... The voice faltered. Or she could still be there. I'll check with the supervisor. The words "still be there" seemed to echo in the quiet room. No, Daniel cut in. Don't just call. I'm coming there myself. He hung up and signaled toward the doorway. His assistant appeared almost instantly, as if she'd been hovering just out of sight. Prepare the car, he said. We're going to Miller Ridge. The assistant nodded briskly. What about the girl? She asked, glancing at Lily with a quick, worried smile. She comes with us, Daniel replied without hesitation. Make sure she has something warm and something sweet to drink. Lily blinked. I can really come? She asked, almost afraid of the answer. You're the reason any of this is happening, he said softly. I think you've earned the right to see how it ends. Outside, the sky was a smudge of gray over white fields. The snowfall had slowed to a soft, steady drift, like the world was exhaling. In the back seat of the black SUV, Lily sat wrapped in a thick coat that smelled faintly of cedar and laundry detergent, her new mittens too big but gloriously dry. A paper cup of hot chocolate warmed her hands. Daniel watched her in the rearview mirror as the car wound through the sleepy town. She was so small, too small to be carrying a fear this big. He thought of all the nights he'd skimmed over overtime reports, turnover numbers, profit margins, never once imagining a child trudging through snow because someone who worked for him hadn't made it home. If my company has anything to do with this, he thought, his jaw setting, that changes today. The Miller Ridge plant loomed out of the snowy haze, a squat shape of steel and flickering fluorescent lights. The rhythmic pounding of machinery echoed through its walls like a muted heartbeat. Workers moved in and out of the entrance, shoulders rounded against the cold, eyes fixed on the ground. No one looked up, until the black SUV rolled to a stop and Daniel Ashford stepped out, coat flaring, purpose in every stride, a small girl trailing behind him like a shadow. The plant looked colder than the air outside, even with all its machines running. Metal walls, strip lights buzzing faintly overhead, the smell of oil and overheated circuits. As Daniel walked through the entrance, the conversations that had been murmuring along the corridor snapped shut. Workers stepped aside without fully realizing why, their eyes sliding away from his. The supervisor hurried up, wiping his hands on a stained clipboard. Mr. Ashford, we weren't told. No, Daniel said, not slowing his pace. You weren't. Lily clung to his assistant's hand, her boots squeaking slightly on the concrete. She was the only small, bright thing in that corridor of tired faces and humming machinery. As they passed a line of workers, one woman glanced at her, then quickly turned away, as if afraid of what their presence might mean. I want the employee rest area, Daniel said, his voice echoing against the walls. Now. The break room, the supervisor stammered, fumbling with a ring of keys. It's really just... Daniel didn't wait. When they reached the narrow door at the end of the hall, he pushed it open himself. The room was barely more than a closet. A dented vending machine flickered in the corner, its light too harsh. A narrow bench, a row of scuffed lockers, a trash can that hadn't been emptied yet. And on the floor, crumpled near a locker door, lay a woman. "Mom!" Lily's scream ripped through the air, sharper than any alarm. She tore free from the assistant and ran forward, slipping on a patch of spilled coffee. Daniel was already moving. He dropped to his knees beside the woman, his coat flaring around him. Rachel Hart lay curled on her side, one arm tucked awkwardly beneath her. Her skin was the wrong kind of pale, not winter pale, but drained, hollow pale. Sweat stuck to her forehead. Her breaths came in shallow, shuddering pulls. "She's burning up," Daniel muttered, his hand against her cheek. Her skin was hot and damp, her lips dry and cracked. "Call an ambulance," he barked at the supervisor, then stopped himself. "No, the car. We'll get her there faster. Now." Lily tried to grab her mother's limp hand, her small fingers shaking. Her voice trembled. "Mommy? Mommy, wake up. I found the big house like you said. You have to wake up now." Rachel stirred only slightly, lids fluttering as if sleep had her by the ankles and refused to let go. A faint sound escaped her throat that might have been Lily's name. Daniel slid one arm under her shoulders, the other beneath her knees, and lifted her carefully. She felt heavier than she looked, not in weight, but in exhaustion and years of pushing too hard. As he carried her out of the room, the hallway fell silent. Workers moved aside, pressed against the walls, some with eyes wide, some looking at the floor as if the sight of her might be too much. No one had noticed she was missing. In the car, Lily sat pressed close to her mother's side, clutching her hand as best she could. The driver's knuckles were white on the wheel. Daniel stared out at the snow-blurred road ahead, jaw clenched, a leaden guilt settling deep into his stomach. Somewhere in the distance, the hospital's red emergency sign glowed through the thickening storm like a heartbeat. Hospitals always smell the same: antiseptic, coffee gone cold, and something else that never quite has a name. In the bright fluorescent light of Memorial General, Rachel looked even smaller on the bed than she had on the factory floor. Exhaustion, severe hypoglycemia, dehydration, sleep deprivation, the doctor said, flipping through her chart with a frown. Her body's been running on fumes for a long time. She's lucky. Another hour, maybe 2, and her organs could have started shutting down. Lucky, Daniel thought, staring at the pale woman connected to the monitors. It didn't feel like luck. It felt like a long, slow failure that had finally become visible. Lily sat curled in the visitor's chair, her legs tucked up, blanket wrapped around her shoulders. One small hand clung to her mother's fingers. She'd fallen asleep like that, her cheek pressed to the back of Rachel's hand, as if letting go might change the outcome. Daniel remained in the other chair, elbows on his knees, watching the rise and fall of Rachel's chest. So this was the woman who had raised the little girl who walked into a snowstorm with more courage than most adults showed in a lifetime. This was the person who had given so much that her own body had finally drawn a line. Hours later, just when the room had settled into that strange hospital quiet, machines humming, footsteps echoing down distant corridors, Rachel stirred. Her eyelashes fluttered. She groaned softly, turning her head. The first thing she saw was Lily. "Sweetheart." Her voice was rough, scraped thin. You shouldn't be here." Lily sat up fast, eyes filling with tears. "You didn't come home," she whispered. "I went to the hill, like you said. I found him." She pointed clumsily at Daniel. Rachel's gaze followed, unfocused for a moment before landing on him. He leaned forward a little. "You're at Memorial General," he said, his tone calm but firm. "You passed out at the plant. You're safe now." She struggled to push herself up. Panic flashed across her features. No, I have to go back. If I miss shifts, they'll let me go. I can't lose that job. I'm a single mom. You're not going anywhere," Daniel interrupted gently, placing a hand near her shoulder without forcing her back. "You almost didn't make it. Your body needs rest more than that company needs another hour of your labor." Tears welled in Rachel's eyes, spilling over before she could stop them. "They cut my hours last month," she whispered, voice shaking. "So I picked up extra, covered when people called out. No breaks. You don't say no if you're afraid of being replaced. I thought if I just pushed a little harder, it would be enough. It's never enough." Daniel looked away, jaw tightening, the words landing like stones inside him. He had built Ashford Industries on efficiency, optimization, lean operations. He'd read reports about overtime, attrition, productivity. None of them had mentioned a woman curled on a factory floor, a child walking through snow. He rose abruptly and stepped to the far side of the room, pulling out his phone like it was a weapon he'd finally decided to aim in the right direction. When his operations director answered, his voice was steady but laced with steel. "I want every shift log and clock-in record from Miller Ridge on my desk within the hour," he said. "And listen carefully. Effective immediately, no employee works more than 10 consecutive hours at any of our facilities. Mandatory breaks. And we're auditing every night shift practice starting tonight." He ended the call before there could be questions. When he turned back, Rachel was watching him, confusion and exhaustion swirling together in her eyes. He walked over to where Lily had dropped her blanket onto the floor and lifted it, shaking it out gently. Then he draped it over the girl's legs, tucking it in the way a father might without thinking. "You're not going to lose anything," he said quietly, meeting Rachel's gaze. "Not your job, not your daughter, not if I can help it." For a moment, the beeping machines and harsh lights faded, and all that remained was the weight of those words between them. Too big for a first meeting, perhaps, but exactly the size of the night that had brought them together. By the following Monday, the storm outside had softened, but inside Ashford Industries, something far stronger was stirring. An internal memo went out before dawn, flashing across inboxes at every plant and office. It came directly from the CEO's account, not routed through layers of managers and assistants as usual. People noticed that. Subject: Immediate policy reforms. From Daniel Ashford. The words felt strange even to him as he typed them at his desk late the night before. The hospital wristband from visitor check-in still around his wrist. He didn't use the polished language his communications team preferred. He wrote the way he had spoken at Rachel's bedside, plainly, with something heavy and real behind each sentence. Maximum shift length reduced to 10 hours. Mandatory breaks every 4 hours. All supervisors retrained on safety and worker welfare. Emergency health fund for on-site incidents. Support program for single parents. Flexible scheduling. Childcare stipends. Financial counseling. In break rooms and locker corridors, people read the memo twice. Some thought it had to be a mistake. Others passed their phones to coworkers silently, eyes wide, not quite trusting hope anymore. A few older employees just nodded once, slow and guarded, like people who'd learned not to celebrate too soon. At the center of all this, completely unaware of the ripple she had set off, Rachel sat in her hospital bed, a paper cup of lukewarm tea warming her fingers. There was a knock at the door. A woman in a neat blazer stepped in, an Ashford pin on her lapel and a thick envelope in her hand. "Ms. Hart," she said kindly, "Mr. Ashford asked me to bring this to you." Rachel frowned, her hand trembling slightly as she opened the envelope. Inside was a letter on heavy paper, neatly typed, and another sheet with numbers she could barely process. Position: part-time administrative assistant, Ashford Industries headquarters. Compensation: higher than her full-time factory wages had ever been. Schedule: flexible hours, no nights, no more graveyard shifts. Time in the morning to walk Lily to school. Time in the evening to tuck her in. Rachel blinked. This can't be right," she whispered. "I don't have a degree. I've only ever worked lines and registers. There must be someone else who needs this more, someone who belongs in those hallways." That afternoon, she found herself sitting in a chair that looked too expensive to touch, in an office with glass walls and a view of the city dusted in lingering snow. Lily sat in the corner, swinging her legs, absorbed in drawing a cat on a sticky note. She had insisted on bringing her favorite stuffed bear, now propped up on the armrest like a small, silent guardian. Daniel stood by the window for a moment before turning toward them. The usual cool polish of his boardroom demeanor was softened by something almost like nervousness. "I don't understand," Rachel said, still clutching the offer letter. "I'm not qualified for any of this. Why would someone like you—" She hesitated, searching for the right words. "Why would you care this much about someone like me?" He rested his hands lightly on the edge of his desk, leaning forward in a way that made the distance between them feel smaller. "Because someone like you," he said slowly, "has been holding up more weight than most people I know, and no one noticed until it nearly killed you." She swallowed hard, eyes burning. "You walked into a storm every night so your daughter could sleep warm," he continued. "Lily walked into a storm because she believed someone out there would help. That means I haven't been doing my job, not really. This kibwa." He nodded toward the paper in her hands. "Is the smallest step I can take toward fixing that. Starting with you." On the chair, Lily looked up at them and then at his coat draped over the back of his seat, remembering how it had wrapped around her like a shield in the snow. "He's Mr. Warmcoat," she announced seriously, as if that settled everything. Daniel blinked, then laughed softly, the sound surprising even himself. "I've been called worse," he said. Rachel's lips curved despite everything. The tension in her shoulders loosened just enough for a tiny breath of possibility to slip in. After a long, quiet moment, she nodded. Okay, she whispered. "I'll try." For the first time in a long time, the future didn't feel like a wall pressing toward her. It felt, just barely, like a door opening. Rachel's first day at the headquarters felt like walking into another world. The lobby was all gleaming floors and tall windows, sunlight bouncing off glass and steel. People moved with purpose, badges clipped to their jackets, coffee cups in hand. She smoothed the front of her plain blouse, suddenly acutely aware that her shoes were the cheapest in the room. Lily trotted beside her, proudly gripping a small backpack with worn straps. Her eyes were wide with fascination at the elevator lights, the potted plants, the reception desk where a bowl of candy sat invitingly. "Good morning, Ms. Hart," the receptionist said with a warm smile that felt genuine, not rehearsed. "And good morning, Lily. Your corner is all ready." What?" Rachel asked, puzzled. The receptionist gestured toward Daniel's office. When they stepped inside, Rachel stopped in the doorway. In the far corner near Daniel's desk, someone had set up a small beanbag chair, a low shelf with a line of picture books, and a cup filled with colored pencils. A soft blanket was folded neatly on top. There was even a little lamp shaped like a moon. "Is that for us?" Rachel asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "For whoever needs it," Daniel replied from his desk without looking up right away. When he did, there was a hint of mischief at the corner of his mouth. "But yes, I had Lily in mind." Lily ran to the beanbag and flopped onto it like she'd been waiting her whole life for this exact spot. "Mom, look," she squealed. "They have the book with the rabbit you like." Rachel couldn't quite find words. Instead, she nodded stiffly and moved to the smaller desk they'd given her near the window, trying to focus on the computer login instead of the sudden lump in her throat. Days turned into weeks, and a quiet rhythm settled over the office. Rachel learned how to sort Daniel's emails, schedule meetings, translate jargon-filled reports into clean summaries. She was meticulous, thorough, always braced for someone to point out what she'd done wrong. But no one did. Little by little, small gestures accumulated like snowflakes that refused to melt. The day Lily sneezed 3 times in a row in the hallway, Daniel was deep in conversation with a board member about projections and market trends. Without missing a beat, he reached into his pocket, handed her a tissue, and tapped her nose with mock seriousness. "Emergency protocol," he said. "Triple sneeze is a level 3 situation." Lily giggled. The board member blinked, momentarily thrown off script, then smiled. On another afternoon, the elevator doors slid open and Lily stepped out tugging at a loose shoelace. Before Rachel could bend down, Daniel dropped to one knee and tied it, the movement practiced and precise. "Can't have our junior executive tripping in the lobby," he said lightly. Rachel watched, something tender and unfamiliar tugging at her chest. He looked comfortable like that, coat wrinkled, tie slightly loosened, hands steady around something small and fragile. One evening, a deadline kept Rachel at her desk longer than she meant to stay. Papers blurred together, and numbers started to swim in front of her eyes. Lily curled up in the corner chair with her bear, her head eventually lolling to one side as sleep stole over her. Rachel told herself she'd just rest her eyes for a second. When Daniel passed by later, the floor had mostly emptied. He stopped in the doorway, taking in the scene. Rachel slumped slightly forward, pen still in hand, a strand of hair falling across her face. Lily asleep with her cheek pressed against the beanbag, the moon lamp casting a soft halo over her. He didn't wake them. Instead, he took off his coat and folded it, laying it gently over Rachel's shoulders. He dimmed the overhead lights and placed a glass of water at the corner of her desk. As he turned to leave, he caught sight of Lily's drawing pinned to the bulletin board. A tall stick figure holding hands with a smaller one in a red dress, the words, "Thank you, Mr. Warmcoat," scrawled in pink. A junior employee walking past paused, watching as Daniel motioned to the cleaning crew to keep their voices down. She didn't say anything, but later, when she rode the bus home, she thought about how leadership could look like this too. In those small, unannounced moments, something in Rachel began to thaw. She started lifting her head when people addressed her, started believing that maybe she wasn't an accident in this place. Lily grew bolder too, calling out, "Hi, Mr. Warmcoat," across the lobby, unbothered by the startled looks of executives unused to being renamed by 6-year-olds. "I've been called worse," Daniel would answer every time, his voice warmer now, eyes crinkling at the corners. Outside, winter slowly loosened its grip on the city. Inside that glass building, a different kind of season was changing too. One made of shared coffee, quiet smiles, and the unfamiliar comfort of knowing someone would notice if you didn't make it home. No one realized that another storm was already gathering at the edges of their lives, waiting for the perfect moment to roll in and test everything they'd begun to build. The morning the next storm arrived, it started almost politely. Snow drifted down in slow, lazy flakes outside the headquarters windows, settling on ledges and tree branches, softening the harsh edges of the city. Inside, the building hummed with quiet focus. Phones rang, keyboards clicked, elevator doors sighed open and shut. Rachel sat at her small desk near the window, fingers flying over the keyboard. She had a major report due, her first one that would land directly in front of the board. She wanted it to be perfect, not just for herself, but for the man who had decided she was worth more than a factory floor. 2 levels below, in the employee lounge, Lily sat in an oversized armchair with her coloring book open on her lap, legs tucked beneath her. Daniel's assistant, Claire, sat nearby, reviewing a stack of papers and keeping one eye on her. "Watch her for a bit," Daniel had asked earlier, shrugging into his suit jacket. "I've got an investor meeting. I'll be back before she gets bored of that bear." "Of course," Claire had smiled. "We'll be just fine." But storms don't care about schedules, and alarms don't always ring for real reasons. Halfway through Danielle's presentation, the building's fire alarm erupted into a shrill, pulsing wail. Red lights flashed in the hallways. A calm, recorded voice urged everyone to proceed to the nearest exit. People stood, shuffled their papers into neat stacks, and began filing out in orderly lines, more annoyed than afraid. Most had done this drill too many times to feel anything but mild impatience. In the lounge, Claire jumped to her feet. "All right, kiddo," she said, grabbing her bag. "Looks like we're taking a field trip downstairs." Lily slid off the chair, clutching her stuffed bear in one arm and her tiny backpack in the other. The hallway outside was suddenly full of moving legs and rustling coats. For a moment, Lily's hand slipped from Claire's. "Stay close, okay?" Claire called over her shoulder, caught in the flow of bodies. But Lily heard something else beneath the alarm and footsteps. A promise she'd been repeating all day. "Mom said she'd be back after the report. I'll go find her." While the crowd moved toward the main stairwell, Lily drifted toward a side corridor, the noise of the crowd muffling behind her. She pushed open a heavy door that led to another stairwell, this one mostly used by staff. The cold hit her in a rush when she pushed through the exit at the bottom. Outside, the storm had changed its mind. The snow was no longer gentle. Wind whipped around the side of the building, sending ice crystals stinging against her cheeks. The parking lot and alley beyond were turning white in uneven patches. "Mom," she whispered, stepping out, her coat flapping. "Mom, where are you?" By the time the alarm was silenced and people were allowed back inside, the lounge chair where Lily had been sitting was empty. The juice box Claire had set beside her remained untouched, small and accusing. Rachel returned from dropping off the finished report, her heart light with the relief of getting it done. The sight of the empty chair made that lightness vanish in a single, brutal heartbeat. "Where's my daughter?" she asked, voice sharp with a fear that rose too fast. Claire's face went pale. "She was just here," Claire stammered. "We went out for the drill. I thought she was right behind me. I thought she was with the crowd." Rachel didn't wait for excuses. Panic surged like electricity through her veins. She ran down the corridor, calling Lily's name, checking restrooms, meeting rooms, corners of hallways where a small girl might have gotten distracted. On another floor, Daniel's phone buzzed in his pocket as he wrapped up his meeting. One look at the message and his composure cracked. Within seconds, he was in the lobby, breath slightly short, tie askew. "She's gone," Rachel said when she saw him, her voice raw. "She's not in the building. Daniel, I can't find her." For a heartbeat, the world went quiet. Then he turned toward the security desk. "Pull the camera feed for every exit," he ordered. "Now!" The screen flickered, then showed Lily in her little coat and gray beanie, pushing open a side door 12 minutes earlier, bear clutched to her chest. "She was looking for you," he murmured, almost to himself. Rachel's knees nearly buckled. "I'm going after her." "So am I," he said, already shedding his suit jacket, already moving toward the doors and into the storm. The wind slammed into him the moment he stepped outside, stealing his breath like a punch. Snow swirled in wild spirals, coating the sidewalks in uneven drifts. For a man used to climate-controlled cars and heated garages, the sudden cold was a shock, but he barely registered it. "Check the perimeter," he barked to the security guard who followed him out. "Garages, loading docks, every alley. If you see anything, call me. Don't wait." He turned toward the side exit from the security footage and scanned the ground. Tiny boot prints dented the fresh snow, already softening at the edges as new flakes fell. Lily's trail. He followed it, heart thudding, shoes slipping slightly on the ice. "Lily," he shouted, his voice ripped apart by the wind. "Lily, sweetheart, where are you?" The prints veered away from the street, toward the back of the building where delivery trucks came and went. For a terrifying moment, the trail disappeared in a blur of tire marks and churned slush. He felt panic rise, hot and useless. Then he saw a flicker of red near the loading docks. He ran. There, wedged between two concrete walls beside a dumpster, Lily huddled in a tight ball, her back pressed to the brick, her bear clutched so tightly to her chest that its stitched-on smile looked strained. Snow clung to her braid and eyelashes. Her cheeks were blotchy with cold and tears. "Mr. Warmcoat?" she whimpered when she saw him, voice trembling. "I couldn't find my mom." Daniel dropped to his knees, uncaring that the cold seeped instantly through his suit pants. "Oh, sweetheart," he breathed, scooping her up, wrapping his arms around her as if he could shield her from every cruel thing the world might ever send. Her body felt too cold. Not like that first day at the gate, but cold enough to make fear claw at his ribs. He pulled her against his chest, tucking her face under his chin. "You scared me half to death," he said, his voice cracking in a way that surprised him. "I thought I lost you," she sniffled, her words muffled against his collar. "The lady said we had to go outside, and then I couldn't find you or Mommy, and the snow was big, and I got lost." "It's okay," he murmured. "You're not lost. I've got you. I've got you." By the time Rachel came skidding around the corner, nearly slipping on an icy patch, tears and snow streaking her face, Daniel was already on his feet with Lily in his arms, his coat wrapped around them both like a makeshift fortress. "Mom!" Lily sobbed, reaching toward her. Rachel let out a sound that was part relief, part broken cry. She pulled them both into her arms, hands shaking as she touched Lily's hair, Lily's cheeks, the back of her head, as if confirming she was real and whole. "I'm so sorry, baby," she whispered over and over. "I'm here now. I'm so, so sorry." Daniel didn't step away. For a long moment, the three of them simply stayed there, clinging to one another while the storm raged around them, their circle of warmth fragile but fiercely real. Later, back inside, they sat in a small conference room wrapped in blankets, fingers curled around steaming cups of cocoa. Lily sniffled occasionally, but mostly watched the marshmallows melt, her lashes still damp. Rachel pressed soft kisses to her daughter's forehead whenever she thought Lily wouldn't notice. Her eyes were swollen, her voice hoarse, but there was a kind of stunned gratitude in her expression too. The kind that comes when you've imagined the worst and then, somehow, gotten another chance. Daniel stood for a while, back against the wall, arms crossed, trying to stop the shaking in his hands. It wasn't from the cold. It was from the thought of what could have happened in just 12 minutes. When he finally moved closer, he crouched down to their level. The official tone, the polished CEO voice, were gone. What remained was simpler, stripped bare. "You two," he said quietly, looking from Lily to Rachel and back again, "have somehow become my whole day, my entire damn day." Rachel looked up, startled by the honesty in his words. This wasn't the careful gratitude of a boss helping an employee. It was something else, something riskier. "I didn't realize how much until I thought I'd lost her," he admitted, brushing a damp strand of hair from Lily's forehead with a tenderness that made Rachel's chest ache. The days that followed were strangely quiet. Daniel insisted Rachel take a few days off. "Paid," he said firmly when she tried to protest. "No arguments. The company can survive without you for 48 hours. I'm not sure I can survive another near heart attack." So Rachel stayed home. The apartment felt different with time in it. She and Lily spent the morning on the couch, wrapped in blankets, watching cartoons and sharing a bowl of popcorn, even though it wasn't even lunchtime. For once, the tension she always carried between her shoulder blades loosened its grip. Just before noon, there was a knock at the door. When Rachel opened it, a delivery man stood in the hallway holding a large woven basket wrapped in crinkling cellophane. A silver ribbon curled at the top. He checked his clipboard. Rachel Hart? She nodded, signing automatically. After he left, Lily bounced on her toes as they carried the basket inside and set it on the table. Rachel untied the ribbon and peeled back the wrapping. Inside were thick thermal socks, a fleece blanket, 2 novels with gentle covers, boxes of her favorite tea brand, the one she only allowed herself on special occasions, and a new sketchbook with a small tin of colored pencils. Tucked among them was a handwritten note in precise, familiar script. Rest. This world needs mothers like you, and girls like Lily need you strong. D.A. Rachel swallowed hard. How does he always know? She murmured. Lily buried her face in the new blanket and inhaled deeply. It smells like Mr. Warmcoat, she announced, as if that explained everything. That afternoon, while Rachel made soup in their tiny kitchen, Lily sat at the table with the new sketchbook open, tongue poking out in concentration. She glued bits of cardboard together, added glitter that got everywhere, and hummed to herself as she drew 3 stick figures holding hands under falling snow. At the top, in bright, wobbly letters, she wrote, "Happy birthday, Mr. Warmcoat. We like you so much." Rachel glanced over and smiled. "It's not his birthday, sweetheart." "I know," Lily said solemnly, "but maybe nobody celebrated it right, so now he gets a do-over." The next morning, with her courage tucked into the pocket of her coat, Rachel carried the card into Daniel's office. She stood outside his door for a long heartbeat, then knocked. "Come in," he called. She stepped inside, held out the crooked, glittery card with both hands. "It's from Lily," she said. "And thank you for the basket, for everything. It meant more than you know." Daniel took the card as if it were made of glass. His smile was small but real as he looked at the 3 stick figures holding hands in the snow. "How did I get so lucky," he said quietly, almost to himself, "to meet you two on a morning like that?" Rachel looked away quickly, cheeks warming, her heart beating a little too hard for the calm room they were standing in. Neither of them knew it yet, but somewhere on his calendar, a charity gala date was already circled. And Daniel was already thinking, not in numbers and projections, but in stories, and how to tell theirs without saying their names. The night of the gala came wrapped in city lights and thin winter air. Ashford Industries held its annual charity event in a downtown atrium with a glass ceiling that made the night sky feel close enough to touch. Strings of warm lights hung overhead like captured stars. People in sleek suits and shimmering dresses drifted between tables, their voices low, their laughter polished. Rachel hadn't expected to be invited. When the email arrived with her name on it, she'd read it 3 times before believing it. She didn't own anything fancy, just a simple blue dress that had lived at the back of her closet for years, waiting for an occasion that never came. That night, she put it on with trembling hands. Lily twirled in the living room when she saw her. "You look like the princess in my stories," she declared. "Just more tired, but pretty." "You're my real critic," Rachel laughed softly, smoothing her daughter's hair. At the atrium, Rachel stayed near the back at first, feeling small among the tall centerpieces and glittering jewelry. She wrapped her fingers around a glass of water like it was an anchor. Lily, sitting beside her at their table, was far more at ease, thoroughly absorbed in the dessert menu. Then the lights dimmed. Daniel walked onto the small stage, a single spotlight catching the silver in his tie. Behind him, a large screen flickered to life. Images of workers in hard hats, factory floors, snow-covered roads. Finally, a familiar drawing appeared. 3 stick figures holding hands in a snowfall. Rachel's heart stumbled. Lily's card. "I want to tell you a story," Daniel began, his voice carrying easily through the room. "About a mother who walked into the dark every night so her child could sleep in the light. And about a little girl who walked into a snowstorm because she believed there had to be at least one adult in this world who would care." He told it without names, but anyone who had seen Rachel in the hallways, anyone who had watched Daniel soften over the past months, understood. He spoke about exhaustion and invisible sacrifices, about the cost of turning away from what hurts to look at. "And then," he said quietly, "they knocked at my gate, and my life, my leadership, was divided into before and after." When he turned toward the crowd and said, "Rachel Hart, would you join me for a moment?" The room erupted in applause. Rachel froze. Lily's hand found hers under the table and squeezed. "It's okay, Mom," she whispered. "I'll clap for you if your knees shake." They did. A little. But Rachel stood anyway, crossing the polished floor under all those watching eyes. Daniel didn't reach for her like a man rescuing someone. He just held out a steady hand and gave her room to breathe. "I'm not brave," she said into the microphone, her voice shaking at first. "I'm just a mom trying to be enough for someone small." She glanced at Lily, who sat on her chair, feet dangling, grinning with all her teeth. "And somehow," Rachel continued, "I found a place where someone made me feel enough, too." The applause that followed was loud and long. It wrapped around her like warmth she hadn't known she'd needed. Daniel stepped closer, not too close, and pinned a small white rose to the front of her dress. "You deserve to stand tall," he murmured, so only she could hear. Every mother does. For the first time in years, she believed him. Later that week, there was no stage, no microphones. Just a warm kitchen in Daniel's house. The estate, once a quiet monument to success, now smelled like garlic bread and simmering tomato sauce. "No suits," Daniel had said. "No speeches, just dinner, just us." Rachel stood at the island, sleeves rolled up, tossing a simple salad. Her hair was tied loosely at the nape of her neck, pieces escaping to brush her cheeks. Across from her, Lily wore an apron far too big for her, stirring the sauce with dramatic seriousness. "Chef Lily," Daniel intoned, tasting a spoonful, "how's our masterpiece coming along?" "It's red," she declared. "That's good." He laughed, the sound echoing easily off the kitchen walls. They ate on the living room floor, bowls of spaghetti balanced in their laps, an old cartoon projected faintly onto the far wall. Lily curled between them, slurping noodles and sighing happily. When the credits rolled, she bounced up. "More popcorn!" she shouted, racing toward the kitchen. In the quiet that followed her exit, Daniel turned slightly toward Rachel. "I used to think I was too busy for a family," he said softly. "Too structured, too set in my ways. But now I notice when your footsteps don't pass my office door, that's new." Rachel's breath caught. "You didn't need to fix our life," she said gently, "but you became part of it anyway." Before he could answer, Lily came trotting back, arms full of popcorn and questions. "If we lived here," she asked with total seriousness, "would I get pancakes every morning?" Rachel groaned. "Lily?" Daniel only smiled, a slow, genuine curve of his mouth. "Only if you help me cook," he replied. Her eyes went wide. "And maybe a puppy." Rachel shot him a warning look. He just winked. Later, he disappeared for a moment and came back from the closet under the stairs carrying a small backpack. Red, with cartoon stars and Lily stitched neatly across the front in yellow thread. He held it out without explanation. Lily gasped, "That's my name!" "Just in case," Daniel said quietly, his gaze flicking to Rachel. "You ever want to stay? You should have something here that's yours." Lily hugged the backpack like treasure. Then she slipped one hand into his and one into her mother's. "Does this mean we belong?" she asked in a small, hopeful voice. "You always did," he answered, his own voice rougher than before. The fire crackled behind them. Outside, the snow clouds were thinning. Inside, in a house that had once echoed with emptiness, a different kind of sound took root. Soft laughter, shared silence, and the fragile, growing certainty of home. Winter came around again the way it always does. Quiet at first, then suddenly everywhere. On a soft, steady snow morning, Rachel and Lily sat cross-legged on the worn rug of their small apartment, wrapping gifts in reused paper and mismatched ribbon. They laughed when the tape stuck to their fingers, when the paper tore wrong, when the cat on Lily's new sweater seemed to glare at the mess. Rachel glanced at the window, at the drifting white outside. Her chest tightened as she remembered another morning's snow, the kind that had swallowed her daughter's footprints on the way to a stranger's gate. She reached over and brushed Lily's hair back from her face. "Promise me," she said quietly, "if you're ever scared again, you won't walk into a storm alone." Lily nodded, unconcerned, already threading ribbon through a homemade tag. "I won't be alone," she said simply. "We have Mr. Warmcoat now." As if summoned, there was a knock at the door. When Rachel opened it, cold air slipped in around Daniel's frame, along with the faint scent of his cologne and the snow melting on his shoulders. He held a red umbrella in one hand and a simple white envelope in the other. "Hi," he said, eyes bright. "Tell me you're not too busy tonight." Rachel blinked. "What is going on?" "There's a small gathering at the house," he said. "Just a few people who matter. I was hoping you and Lily might come, if you're not in the middle of saving the world with tape and wrapping paper." Lily darted to the doorway. "Can we go, please, Mom?" Rachel looked between them, something fluttering in her chest. "Okay," she said softly. We can go. The estate glowed when they arrived. Windows lit with warm golden light, wreaths hanging from the doors, candles flickering in the entryway. But when they stepped inside, the real surprise wasn't the decorations. It was the walls. Everywhere Rachel looked, there were photographs. On the mantel, framed on side tables, clipped to twine with tiny wooden pins. Lily asleep on Daniel's shoulder in the office, her mouth open in total trust. Rachel laughing with her head slightly thrown back, flour on her cheek, Lily and Daniel standing behind her with spatulas in hand. A blurred image of the three of them in the park on a windy day, hair wild, faces mid-laughter. You kept these? Rachel whispered, one hand covering her mouth. I didn't just keep them, Daniel said, appearing at her shoulder. I collected them. They're the days I started to feel like myself again. He guided them gently into the main room where a handful of people, his housekeeper, a couple of neighbors, Claire from the office, stood holding glasses of cider and hot chocolate. Conversations quieted as Daniel stepped forward. Some people, he began, raising his glass, walk into your life in the middle of a storm. At first, it feels like chaos, like trouble, like something you're too busy to deal with. He smiled faintly. But sometimes, those people end up becoming your shelter. Rachel's eyes shimmered. Then, to the audible surprise of the guests, Daniel set his glass aside and slowly dropped to one knee in front of her. A hush fell over the room, the kind that seems to make the air thicker. He took a small silver ring from his pocket. Simple, elegant, not flashy. He looked at Rachel, then at Lily, then back at Rachel, as if making sure both were truly here. You came to my gate with a question, he said, his voice steady and full. Sir, my mom didn't come home last night. He glanced at Lily, his gaze soft. That question changed everything for me. He turned back to Rachel. So, tonight, I have one of my own. Will you both... His voice thickened for a second. He cleared his throat gently. Will you both let me come home with you every day for the rest of our lives? For a moment, Rachel couldn't speak. Her hands flew to her face, tears spilling over. Beside her, Lily bounced in place, clapping. Say yes, Mom, she begged. Please say yes. Rachel laughed through the tears then, a sound cracked and beautiful. She nodded again and again. Yes, she managed. Of course. Yes. The room erupted into warm applause. Daniel slid the ring onto her finger with careful hands, then stood, opening his arms. Rachel stepped into them, and Lily barreled into both of them at once, their three bodies tangling in a messy, perfect embrace. Later, after the guests had gone and the house had grown quiet, the three of them sat in the back seat of Daniel's SUV parked in front of Rachel's building. Snow tapped gently on the windows. Light glowed from the apartment they were about to leave behind, full of old memories and thin walls. Inside the car, it felt warmer than any room she'd ever lived in. Rachel rested her head against Daniel's shoulder. Lily dozed across both their laps, fingers still curled around her stuffed bear. Get in, Daniel murmured with a small, crooked smile, his hand closing around hers. This time, let me take you home. Rachel turned, eyes still shining but steady now. Only if there are pancakes tomorrow, she whispered. Every morning, he promised. The car pulled away slowly, taillights disappearing into the snowy night. Behind them, a small apartment full of hard years and tender memories. Ahead of them, something rarer than success or comfort. A place to belong. A house on a hill that had once been just a landmark in the distance, now on its way to becoming their home. And somewhere, in the quiet spaces between one snowfall and the next, the story of a little girl who'd said, Sir, my mom didn't come home last night, settled into something lasting, a reminder that one child's courage and one stranger's open door can change more than just a winter morning. If this story kept you company tonight, if Daniel, Rachel, and Lily found a corner in your heart, remember to come back for more. There are always other storms, other gates, other small miracles waiting to be told. Until then, stay kind, stay warm, and never underestimate what a single act of compassion can set in motion.